fourth canto, chapter number 9, entitled Dhruva Maharaj Returns Home. And it is text number 64, second to last. Oh no, sorry, there's a few more texts. So yeah, 64, coming towards the end of the chapter. Vapyo Vaidhurya Sopana Padmotpala Kumudvati Hamsa Karandhava Kula Jushtaschakrava Sarasai. Synonyms: Vapya, lakes; Vadhurya, emerald; Sopana, with staircases; Padma, lotuses; Utpala, blue lotuses; Kumatvati, full of lilies; Hamsa, swans; Karandhava, and ducks; Kulai, by flocks of; Jushta, inhabited; Chakrava, the Chakravakas, geese; Sarsai, and by the cranes. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj. Translation: There were emerald staircases which led to lakes full of various colored lotus flowers and lilies, and swans, karandhavas, chakravakas, cranes, and similar other valuable birds were visible in those lakes. Purport: It appears that not only was the palace surrounded by compounds and gardens with varieties of trees, but there were small man-made lakes also, where the water was full of many-colored lotus flowers and lilies. And to get down to the lakes, there were staircases made of valuable jewels such as emeralds. By the beautifully positioned garden houses, there were many luxuriant birds, such as swans, chakravakas, karandhavas, and cranes. These birds generally do not live in filthy places like crows do. The atmosphere of the city was very healthy and beautiful. It can simply be imagined from its description.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, can you please increase your volume a bit because it seems to be
Okay,
lower than
try come
very
a
low.
little. Om Gyanatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshulunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I'll read the translation one more time. There were emerald staircases which led to lakes full of variously colored lotus flowers and lilies, and swans, karandavas, chakravakas, cranes, and similar other valuable birds were visible in those lakes. So we're hearing about a description of Maharaj Uttanapad's kingdom. Dhruva Maharaj has made his glorious return from his austerities in the jungle, in the forest, and we've heard in previous verses how he's returned home. And now we're hearing a description of what the kingdom was like. And so for a non-devotee or an quote-unquote ordinary person to read about this or to hear the description of the kingdom, they would just think, oh, this is just another part of the mythology. It's just another part of the Hindu mythology. You know, they have the four-headed Brahma god, and they have stories of people like Devahuti and Pila, so Kadama Muni, traveling throughout the universe in these wonderful palace spaceships, and this is just another part of the mythology. You know, if they were to hear the opulence of these cities, that there were emerald staircases going into big ponds filled with all kinds of rare and exquisite birds. So it seems very inconceivable how a kingdom could be so gorgeously decorated and so naturally opulent. Um, so just people would just think, oh, this is just another part of the mythology of ancient India. But as it's often explained, mythology or something that appears to be mythological to us, um, it's based on our own experience of the world around us, and it appears mythological because it's so far different from the world that we live in. But if we're to go back to their world and the world that they live in, then our world here now in Kali Yuga would also seem very mythological. So our experience of what appears to be very wonderful, or what appears to be a myth or to be mythology, it depends on our standpoint in time, where we are. So for the residents of Satya Yuga to hear about Kali Yuga and what happens in Kali Yuga, they would just think, no, that's mythological. How could humans live like that? His Holiness Devamrita Swami, he wrote a small book called Hiding in Unnatural Happiness, meant to encourage people to um, take to reading Srimad Bhagavad Gita. And so it's a nice book which, yeah, encourages people to seek out higher happiness and to read Bhagavad Gita. And in this book, at a certain point, he presents 5 myths which pervade the current world that we live in, especially the Western world. And those 5 myths, he describes that the first one is that we are under the impression that, number one, money will bring us happiness. But we see more than ever people who are very wealthy in this world, they're actually the most dissatisfied. They're constantly having fights, divorces, um, problems with their family, problems with their mental health. There's always some issue happening. And then secondly, he mentions how technology will bring us well-being. So in a world where we're more connected than ever, we can use Zoom, or we can use WhatsApp, Facebook, Skype, Signal, Flickr, Instagram, so many platforms of social media and so many different varieties of technology, but they haven't increased the well-being of people at all. In fact, it's the opposite. The well-being of people has decreased. The third myth is that technology will, sorry, weapons will bring us security. So now practically every country has got some sort of, except for New Zealand, a few other places, but almost everyone, every major nation in the world has got some sort of stock of nuclear warheads. And it's all under the name of protection, and no one's supposed to use them for any other purpose than simply protecting themselves. But we know even if just one of these nuclear warheads is dropped, then it causes destruction for not only the country that it's dropped on, but the whole environment of the earth. We can't imagine what would happen if there was nuclear war, even just in one country, 1 or 2 countries, how that would, what the ramifications would be. So we live in a more, rather than giving us security, it's actually become more and more insecure, the world that we live in, because of all the weaponry that's there. And the fourth myth is that the earth will provide us with unlimited resources for our exploitation. So now we're seeing, of course, that that's not the case. That the more we take from the earth, the more that we exploit the earth, then the more these natural resources which we rely upon, such as water, are disappearing. Just yesterday, I was on book distribution, and one lady was telling me about how the major river which runs through Italy is now drying up, and there's pictures of people standing in the middle of the river and it's ankle deep. So something like 70% of the population of Italy depends upon this resource, but it's gradually disappearing because of the activities of human beings, um, taking more than what they need for unnecessary things, like raising animals just for the purpose of eating, requires so much water. And so therefore the water is gradually disappearing. And the fifth myth is that after we've finished exploiting the earth in whatever way we like, then the byproducts, the things that we create, then there'll just be unlimited space for us to dump those things, whether it's our cell phone or whether it's our cars or whatever it is. We think that the earth will provide an unlimited space for us to dispose of all of that leftover goods. So I saw yesterday as well on a news headline that there's a place in Finland now where they have dug these huge holes to get rid of nuclear waste, because nuclear waste takes around 100,000 years to decompose, and they have to put it somewhere. So they've decided to dig a very large hole and put this nuclear waste in there. And they've calculated that the hole will be deep enough that it should be safe for the next 100,000 years, and hopefully no humans will happen to discover that. Because if a human being comes in contact, or human civilization comes in contact with nuclear waste, then as we know, it's fatal. But how can these people predict what's going to happen even just next year? What to speak of 100,000 years in the future? How do they know that human beings won't dig up this area, or that there won't be an earthquake in this area, or that somehow this nuclear waste will come to the surface? So for the residents of Satya Yuga, for Maharaj Uttanapad and Dhruva Maharaj to hear about the activities of people in Kali Yuga, how human beings could be so foolish, it would seem like mythology to them. How could they put all of their happiness just on economic development, thinking that money will make them happy? How could they think that social media will give them fulfillment? How could they think that nuclear weapons will give them security? How could they think that the earth will provide unlimited resources for them to do whatever they like, and then give them a space to put all of their junk without any reactions? So for different yuga, our yuga seems uh, inconceivable. Just like for us, in our conditioned state, when we first read Bhagavatam, when we first heard about this, we might think, oh, how can that be? Surely not. People living with, big golden palaces and emerald staircases. An emerald is something that we might see, a tiny little small emerald on an earring somewhere, or maybe on a necklace. But a whole staircase or staircases leading down into brilliant rivers and lakes. So this was a different age, and the people are more pious. As we know, Mother Bhumi, the earth, she's a person. She's not just a person, but she's a devotee. And like any person, she reciprocates with us according to how we treat her. So the people of different yugas, as we know, are so much more pious. And so the result of piety is that the earth reciprocates in such a way that all these natural resources are there in abundance, whether it's in the form of gold or rain or whatever it is that the citizens need. And on the other hand, when people are so impious, then we see all these things are taken away from them. It doesn't rain properly anymore, or it's too hot. So things are restricted. And we live in a situation where, as Prabhupada said, women are decorated with plastic, and all the gold is kept underground by a few people who are extremely wealthy by today's standards. So we don't want to hear from the people of this day and age, because, as we know, as the Shastra tells us, Prayanal Puyasha Sabhya Kalav Asmin Yughe Jana Manda Sumanda Mataya Manda Bhagya Kipatuta. That in this age of Kali, men they have short lives, they're quarrelsome, they're lazy, they're misguided, they're unlucky, and above all, they're always distressed. So the men of this age, they'll tell us that, this is just mythology, the Srimad Bhagavatam, and actually the current civilization that we live in is the best civilization that's ever been here. We're the most advanced human beings that have ever been, and this is the all in all. But why should we take such people seriously when they have no qualifications? They're lazy, misguided, unlucky, unfortunate, uh, always distressed. So what can they really actually understand about what real wealth is and what life is actually meant for? So we don't want to hear from these people about how the earth came about, how we all evolved from apes or whatever it may be. But rather we want to hear from Srimad Bhagavatam. We know that there's the descending process of knowledge and there's the ascending process of knowledge. So the ascending process of knowledge means that we try to understand the world around us by our own endeavor. Through science, we try to objectively understand the world, where everything has come from, etc. Very difficult task and could take lifetime just to human beings, they can't even understand how a bumblebee is flying. Doesn't They can't even understand that, what to speak of where we all come from. So to try to understand these things through the ascending process of knowledge is stupid, foolish. Not that science doesn't have its place, but when you're trying to understand the ultimate goal of life, where everything comes from, how human beings should live, it's much easier to take knowledge from a higher source, which is the descending process. So to take your knowledge from the Vedas and to hear about what actual truth is. So yeah, we could think, oh, okay, maybe this is just mythology. Listen to the current authorities in the world, or we can listen to Bhagavatam and hear about the previous ages, whether it's Satya Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, Treta Yuga. They all lived very opulently. Just last night, I was listening to, I was reading Krishna book, the section where Krishna enters into Mathura. So we all know the story how Akrura was sent by Kamsa to Vrindavan to invite Krishna and Balaram to come to Mathura for a wrestling match. So Krishna and Balaram, they've just entered into the outer districts of Mathura. And there Nanda Maharaj and Upananda and all the cowherd boys are waiting for them. And so when Krishna and Balaram arrive, they tell Akrura, okay, thank you for taking us. Now, please go home and we've got a few things to do. So Akrura, he wants Krishna and Balaram to please come over to my place at least, I've taken you all this way, you might as well come over to my home. And Krishna says, well, surely we'll do this in the future, but first I have to give some pleasure to my relatives by killing some demons. So Akrura leaves, and then Krishna and Balaram, they enter into Mathura. And as they come up to the gate of Mathura, they see that there is a very large wall or a very large gate surrounding Mathura. And what's it made from? It's made from pure first-class marble. You can only imagine such a huge gate surrounding such a huge city, very opulently built in marble. And then the doors to this gate, they're made from pure gold. And it's not just a house door, or not just a garage door, but you can imagine these doors would have to be big enough to fit a royal assembly of elephants and chariots and so many things. So I can only imagine the size of these pure golden doors. So Krishna, Balaram, and the cowherd boys go through these big golden doors. And on the other side, they see very large canals, just like it's described in this verse today. Man-made canals which surround the city of Mathura to protect it from any unwanted invaders. And then after these big man-made canals, they see beautiful orchards with beautiful fruits and flowers, all growing in abundance for the citizens of that city. And as they continue onward into the city, they see many big houses which are made of copper and brass, solely for the purpose of storing grains for the citizens. And they're decorated very nicely. And as they continue through, then they see the houses of Mathura, and they appear to be, Prabhupada says, designed by one engineer because they're all so perfectly symmetrical and so beautifully made. Not like the hodgepodge suburbs that we live in here, where everything is all kind of a mix of 100-year-old houses to 5-year, modern and old, and all different sizes and different colors and big hodgepodge. But no, this was very beautifully um, designed houses, all appearing to be perfectly symmetrical. And they're all decorated with silk cloths, um, flowers like narcissus and roses, festoons decorating the doors. And every house has its own garden with fruit trees and flowers to supply the inhabitants of the home. So they come to the crossings in the city and they see that the crossings are decorated with jewels and gold, and everything appears to be very opulent. There's so much natural opulence in the city of Mathura. So here we hear consistently throughout the Vedic literature, throughout Srimad Bhagavatam, Prabhupada's books, the opulence of Vedic culture, that wealth was not measured in terms of just financial money or a big car, or whatever it is that we deem valuable. Rather, it was, Prabhupada says in one purport, real wealth means many places to sit, ghee, yogurt, milk, um, an abundance of these natural products. So as Krishna and Balaram continue with their cowherd friends, then they come to the central part of Mathura. And at this point, Akrura had already entered into Mathura and he'd already told King Kamsa that Krishna and Balaram had arrived. And word of this spread like wildfire because everyone had heard about Krishna and Balaram. They'd been hearing about their activities for so long now, and they'd all wanted to have darshan of the Lord. So it's described how all of the ladies, they were in the middle of feeding their children, taking their bath, or doing their household duties. And when they heard that Krishna and Balaram were finally here, they just left all of their activities and ran to the roof. Some of them only had one earring on, they weren't dressed properly, or they just left everything and ran to the roof to see Krishna and Balaram and the cowherd boys arriving in Mathura. And when they saw them, then from the roof they started showering flowers upon them. And actually, I had sort of a tangible experience of this in Mayapur in 2020. We were there just a month before the pandemic began, and they were celebrating the opening of the Pujari floor and the TOVP. So to celebrate this, they took Srila Prabhupada from the current temple. They took him out of the temple with a big procession of thousands of devotees, huge kirtan, and we all squeezed through the little door which enters into the Panchatattva side of the temple. So we went out that door and then came past I believe it's the Lotus building, which is the very long building in Mayapur, which runs through the middle. And so there was thousands of devotees following Srila Prabhupada with a big Harinam, taking him to the TOVP to see the Pujari floor. And the procession was being headed by a couple of huge elephants, decorated very beautifully. And there were people blowing conch shells, playing all kinds of musical instruments. And as we went past the Lotus building, then there was hundreds of Madhajis, ladies on top of the building, throwing so many flowers, all types of flowers, roses, marigolds, everything you can imagine. And as I was watching this procession, and it was so loud, so much happening, I was thinking, wow, this reminds me of when Krishna enters into Mathura. So it's such a beautiful scene, so auspicious, conch shells blowing, so many things happening. And it all appeared very wonderful. So this was, I got some realization of what Vedic culture would look like, how beautiful everything is, how auspicious everything is. And it's all meant for the glorification of Krishna. and Krishna's devotees. So as Balaram and Krishna, they continue further into the city, then as we know, they come across the washerman. And Krishna, he was actually very pleased to ask the washerman for the best cloth that the washerman had. And we all know the washerman's response, unfortunately. He said, "Who are you to ask for the king's clothes? Don't you know that these things, they're meant for King Kamsa? You're just a cowherd boy. How can you have these? How can you even consider asking for these things?" Actually, before Krishna asked for them, he promised the washerman that he would be greatly satisfied by giving whatever cloth Krishna wanted, and that he would be blessed with all good fortune. But the washerman denied him this. And why did he deny him this? It was because of his association with King Kamsa. His intelligence had become polluted. He couldn't see things properly. So as we know, Krishna, with the palm of his hand, chopped off the head of the washerman. And then him and the cowherd boys took whatever cloth they wanted. And actually, there was a tailor there. And this tailor took that cloth that Krishna wanted, and he made very nice clothes for Krishna, and then presented those clothes to Krishna and Balaram. And Krishna blessed this tailor that uh, you'll have all good fortune in life. And after your life, which will be filled with uh, everything that you need, then you'll go back to Vaikuntha. You'll attain Sarupya Mukti. So two different people got two different results based on the mentality that they had. One was a devotee of Krishna, and one was a devotee of a non-devotee. He was a devotee of a demon, of Kamsa, and therefore he got a particular result. So we can learn from this pastime that Krishna, he wants us to offer to him what we have. Not that he needs it, but he knows that if we offer with love and devotion whatever it is that we have, then we'll become the most satisfied. Actually, we'll be satisfied by that offering of love and devotion to him. And what kind of offerings should we be giving to Krishna? We want to give him offerings of natural resources such as products from the cow, natural fruits, flowers, all these things that we hear and see in Vedic culture. And we want to ideally have that culture ourselves, having natural fruits, flowers, milk products in abundance that we can offer to Krishna and then take in return as prasadam. So this is actually a real wealthy civilization, is that they value the natural resources of this world and they use them properly. There's a purport that I was reading last night that I wanted to share, which talks about this. It's from the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. If you would like to look at it in your own time, then it's the 5th canto, chapter 16, and it's text number 25. So I'll just read the purport, and it gives you a good idea of what we're talking about. The Prabhupada says, this verse hints at the perfection of human society, even within this material world. The miserable conditions of this material world can be corrected by a sufficient supply of milk, yogurt, honey, ghee, molasses, food grains, ornaments, bedding, sitting places, and so on. This is human civilization. Ample food grains can be produced through agricultural enterprises, and profuse supplies of milk, yogurt, and ghee can be arranged through cow protection. Abundant honey can be obtained if the forests are protected. Unfortunately, in modern civilization, men are busy killing the cows that are the source of yogurt, milk, and ghee. They are cutting down all the trees that supply honey, and they are opening factories to manufacture nuts, bolts, automobiles, and wine instead of engaging in agriculture. How can the people be happy? They must suffer from all the misery of materialism. Their bodies become wrinkled and gradually deteriorate until they become almost like dwarves, and a bad odor emanates from their bodies because of unclean perspiration, resulting from eating all kinds of nasty things. This is not human civilization. If people actually want happiness in this life and want to prepare for the best in the next life, they must adopt a Vedic civilization. In a Vedic civilization, there is a full supply of the necessities mentioned above. So if we hear, if we try to gather knowledge from the descending process, if we hear from Krishna through the parampara, if we hear from Prabhupada, then they make it very, Prabhupada makes it very clear what kind of life we should be living. He would say, do you think this automobile civilization will last? No. As we're already seeing, petrol prices are going up. Prices of living, cost of living is increasing. So this culture that we hear about in Bhagavatam, we may not be able to completely imitate it. We may not be able to have emerald staircases, but we should be aspiring and desiring to have a civilization which, within devotees, which attracts the people in general because of all of the natural resources which we have in abundance. So we don't have to work very hard just to maintain ourselves. As you hear when Krishna and Balaram enter Mathura, you can see that so many orchards, houses filled just with grains, everything is there, ready for the citizens. It's not a huge endeavor to work day in, day out just to get bread and butter on the table or ghee and roti. So Prabhupada, when he sent devotees to New Zealand, you can read the letters. And there Prabhupada explained how he didn't mention so much about temples, but he wanted devotees to purchase a farm and actually start Varnashram Dharma. That was his suggestion, and that was his desire for New Zealand, because New Zealand, as he said, was a first-class agricultural country. So that's not to downplay or to not appreciate what we already have and the wonderful temple that we have and all the devotees doing wonderful service there. But also we have to keep in mind that Prabhupada did want us to attempt a Vedic culture, even in this age that we live in. He wanted cow protection and he wanted farm, where devotees could show an ideal life and the public would become attracted. And at the moment where the Brahmacharya Ashram and other devotees around New Zealand are doing an extra effort, a mid-year marathon on book distribution, and I have just been in the Waikato, and I've been going to a lot of the different farming towns around there, and so many people now are attracted to this lifestyle. So many of the people I'm meeting on the street were telling me how, yeah, the price of living is going through the roof and they think it's just going to get worse, and they're wondering, where are the farm communities? Where can I go and live in a community with people who grow their own food, who have their own grains, who have their own milk products? This will become such an attractive lifestyle for people as Kali Yuga progresses, because as we know, the government doesn't become any more beneficial. It becomes harder and harder, to the extent that people leave the cities to go and live in the forests. So, when that will happen, who can say? But at least we want to be prepared. We want to have a nice, attractive society for people to see themselves and become attracted by, and then become devotees. Um, so who knows how that will happen, how we will get a farm in New Zealand, but we want to keep it in our minds that, of course, there are devotees already protecting cows and doing so much, but we would like to have ghee to offer to the deities in the temple, fresh milk to offer to the deities in the temple, which come from cows who are protected, from Krishna's cows. And how that will happen, where the farm will come from, let's see, because who knows what will happen in the past. For example, we read about Shama Sundar Prabhu meeting George Harrison, and just from that one contact, then George Harrison was able to spread the Mahamantra through his songs and music throughout the world. So just one person can do so much service. So there must be one farmer out there who's willing to give his farm to the devotees. It's just a matter of finding that person. We actually had experience of this in the Brahmachari ashram a couple of years ago. In Hamilton, we had a center, and it wasn't in the ideal part of town. It was in the red light district of Hamilton on Hood Street. So there was always parties going on, and it was very loud and not a very nice area. But we were having Friday night programs and inviting people to come to our place to have kirtan and prasadam and hear a little bit of the philosophy. And so there was one man who started coming, and he thought, why are you guys living here? This is such a bad place to be living for monks. Why don't you come and live at my place? And so for a whole year or more, then the brahmacharis were living, 3 or 4 of us would go down there, rotate every couple of months, would go down there and live in this person's house, Alex. And he actually became a devotee, started chanting 16 rounds. He had his kids and his job, and he came to every Friday night program, and he learned how to cook prasadam. He'd read Prabhupada's books, and he facilitated the whole program for us there. He let us live in his place. We basically started an ashram in his house, full morning program, Mangalati, everything. Um, and this person, where did he come from? He was just walking around on the street in Hamilton one day, and then he saw Srinivas Prabhu and his wife on Harinam in Hamilton with a couple of devotees, and he'd never seen Hare Krishnas before, never heard the Maha Mantra. And when he saw it, he thought, wow, what is this? He became so attracted. So he followed the Harinam, and then at the end, he got a flyer from the devotees there for Mantra Lounge, and he got a book, and he started coming along, and he became a devotee. And then he gave us what resources he had. So who knows, maybe someone will meet a millionaire who's got a huge farm, or who can buy a huge farm and give it to the devotees, and then we can show the world, we can show New Zealand how an actual human civilization should be, as Prabhupada says, that this current civilization, it's not human civilization. So somehow or other, we have Prabhupada's desire to have the beginnings of Vanashram Dharma. How long that will take, who can say, but have to begin with some, as far as I understand, begin with some agricultural situation where we protect cows, and then from there, things can continue onward. So we, again, just to conclude, to wrap up, we have to become convinced that the current civilization that we live in, it's not actually valuable. Of course, devotees, they use everything and anything in Krishna's service, but it's not a sustainable way to live. And it's not a way that easily facilitates our devotional service in comparison to an agricultural society, something like that of Vedic culture. So we hear from Bhagavatam, hear from Prabhupada, become inspired to somehow try to make steps towards implementing that. And in the future, hopefully, we can have this situation with Krishna's cows and the deities in the center of the devotees' lives. So we'll stop there and ask if there's any questions or comments or corrections or any thoughts about what's been said. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji, for this nice class. So the devotees, if anybody has anything to make a comment or make some addition, anything in the points, you can kindly make it.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna, Dandavat
Hare
Pranam.
Krishna. Yes, it's a beautiful sloka. It's nicely representing the difference between this Kali Yuga and Satya Yuga. What a vast difference. You can't even imagine. It just look like a mythology because we cannot think of the opulences had at that time, and now how is the nature is tortured and the opulences is diminishing. So the beautiful examples you have given is to make it understand the beauty of this Satya Yuga and what we are losing in this age of Kali. So the very good examples of nuclear warfare, quarreling, and people are fighting, countries are fighting. So it's beautifully explained.
Mm.
And then you have referred the slokas of 1.111 about this people in this Kali Yuga. Nicely explained. Thank you, Prabhuji. Given an enlightenment of this slokas. Though the sloka is very small, but the inner meaning is very, very deep. So they're hard to understand by the people in general, and they can't digest it. And then they refer it and name it as a mythology because they don't have knowledge. But as Srila Prabhupada given us a gift, Bhagavatam, which gives the all resource of information right from the Satyajug to this Kali Yuga, the abundance of opulences. And that refers to our Bhagavad Gita. If we look at the opulences of the Supreme, we can understand this subject matter well. Otherwise, it's just a mythology. Yeah, people think in general. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Very nicely said. Hare Krishna.
Anybody else who wants to talk about this? It appears nobody is there to talk. So thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you, Prabhuji,
Thank you.
for the nice class. And we hope you will be available to talk in future also. And thank you for your nice class. And I also thank you all the participants who have participated to make it a success. So Srimad Bhagavatam ki
Jai.
Jai.
Prabhupada ki jai.
Prabhupada ki jai.
Pancha kalpatarubhyascha.
Vasundevaiva
Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo
Ananta Kodi Vaishnavrinda ki
Vrinda
jai.
ki jai.
Aravinda Das Prabhu ki jai.
Jai. Hare Krishna.
Jai.
Hare Krishna.
So we are ending the meeting.